Our next session this afternoon is about building winning Indian brands. As you walk the streets of Covent Garden in the beautiful months of June and July and see the streets covered with Aperol spritz and summer hats, you turn your head and see a Forest Essential and an Napa Dory and feel immense pride as an Indian. We're going global, and while that journey for many years has been about chefs and hotels, it's endearing to see how our homegrown brands have transcended geographies. They're focused towards creating luxury, staying committed to quality, and yet weaving with the Hindustani heart has redefined brand India. Our panel this afternoon, Mr. Dilip Kapur, the bagman of India. Hidesign needs no introduction, having made its way into the heart of many young women. I distinctly remember buying my mother one for her birthday, the day I could afford it, a green color at that. Mr. Samrath, Bedi, Executive Director, Forest Essentials, from enabling the distinct jasmine fragrance that an Oberoi lobby was known for, and we were forced to smuggle little bottles for our guests, for they would simply fall in love with it, to building a market for Indian Ayurveda and putting India on the map itself. Ravissant, from gifting on occasions and otherwise and making its way into many a mantelpieces, it's a perfect way to make your presence permanent in people's homes and hearts. From Silver Kings, her family business, to working for the King of Silver, Ms. Shalinee Gurtu, Head of Retail Operations India, has overseen corporate and interior projects for many clients and is committed to taking the brand onwards and upwards. Moderating this very rich table today is Mr. Manoj, founder of EMBRAND, committed to building the belief that while advertisements are forgotten, memories stay. Over to you, sir.
He said it's all about the economy, stupid. So, yeah, and economics and most national economies are driven by business because business creates the jobs. And ever since the beginning of this century, it's been true that the brand is the business, right? So, so to talk about branding, there's a lot of stuff that you read in academia as well as in media. Everybody has an opinion of what branding is. But the most brutally simple definition was given to me, well, not to me, to Brand Equity, Economic Times, by Carlos Ghosn, the gentleman who put together one of the largest mergers in the world, Renault and Nissan. So he was asked, why is it that your brands, despite being famous across the world, not getting much traction in India? So he said, before you discuss branding, first get the product right. So yeah, so that's what we do at EMBRAND. We help get the product right. And a product is what a product does, and for that, it's a user experience. So what we do is we find out what are the kind of user experiences that customers want, and two, because it's a business, how much are they willing to pay for it? And that gives you a value equation. We put it up to the client to decide then the toughest question of all. Should you reduce the user experience for a considerable reduction in cost, or should you enhance the user experience even if it means increasing price? So in my experience of repairing broken brands, much like the Panchar repair wala, I've discovered that adding higher user experience at the cost of a high price is what builds brands. The rest, cutting prices, any shopkeeper can do, right? And the way we do it is that we urge our clients to take that route because that's what endures. And driving this is a very simple reason why the product is the core of the user experience, is that the 15 years I spent in advertising, I worked very closely with IMRB, then the largest research group in India. MRB was the largest research group in the world. One truth that we learned was that memories of advertising fade very quickly, and it's especially true in today's over-communicated world. You know, doom scrolling all the time, you know. You watch people going down a chute while watching a phone, while memories of user experience can last a lifetime, right? So get that right first. And nobody has ever proved that point, coming back to the economy, about brands, than has Apple. Ever since the turn of the century, Apple actually brought in this whole aspect of UX branding, like we call our process, and toppled Coca-Cola, uh, McDonald's, and other FMCG brands off the charts of Interbrand, which measures the pulling power of a brand, which is called brand asset value. In fact, people like Warren Buffett looks at BAV as a critical tool to invest. And one of his key investments today is giving sleepless nights to Elon Musk. And that brand that he invested in was a battery maker first, and then realized since electric vehicles are nothing but batteries on wheels, launched BYD, Build Your Dreams. I recently tested one in Gurgaon, and I would say it's not BMW or Mercedes-Benz or Audi that got to watch out. It's going to be Porsche. So those of you who haven't seen it, do see it. So coming back, now the great thing about Apple is that just before COVID, it became the first business in the history of business to touch a market cap of $1 trillion, right? Just as COVID ended, it touched $3 trillion. And $3 trillion was at that time, I don't know about it now, is the GDP of India. So, yeah, so brands can, one single brand can build an economy. So, and following Apple not far behind are about 90 brands, and most of them are from the G7 nations, which are the economically the most powerful group in the world. And this is not correlation, there is a causality here. And the best example of that is in 2014, one Chinese brand entered this list called Huawei. Next year, it was higher. And very soon, it's a race between Xiaomi and OnePlus. India has not a single brand out there. I wish, therefore, that in the confabulations of Niti Aayog, sorry, this is bureaucratic, not political, that the ghost of Stephen Jobs would sometimes come and chair those meetings. But it wasn't so till the time Robert Placé came, Robert Clive came, for the Battle of Placé. Until then, in an article called GDP Since Christ, India accounted for 33% of the world's GDP. Today, it's less than 4%. So, but it wasn't always so, like I said. At that time, this has a close thing to do with brands and their identity. For instance, the color purple has always been known in the Western world as the color of royalty. And the reason was only royalty could afford it. And this was largely because of dyers of silk and fine cloth in a small district called Kannur, as the British used to call it, using jamun to give that color purple. And maybe there's, maybe there's a conspiracy to make sure that India is hidden from the color purple. But the original name of purple was indigo. So how much more Indian can you get? Right? So I'm very honored today that reinventing that wheel, which India needs today desperately, is a distinguished panel of representatives of 3 brands who are doing their bit, A, by not selling cheap, 2, by making sure that they're not playing Ranji Trophy, which a lot of our large corporations still do. And they're playing like Mr. Virat Kohli for the ICC championship. And also, I also take this occasion that the brand that I'm in right now, its facilities, gave me a great sense of pride in Dubai when my dentist asked me to come for his marriage anniversary party. And on the walls were photographs of the location. So I asked him, where was this? So he said, the Oberoi Aswan. He's Egyptian, he's a Coptic Christian. So I said, really? And I said, do you know if it's Indian? He says, of course I know it. So I said, so was that your choice? He says, no, actually it was a second choice. Since I was wooing my wife, I thought I'd have a marriage in the Taj Mahal, but then I thought this is the next closest thing. And since it was on the Nile, how much more Egyptian could I be other than on a location like this? So, yeah, so let me introduce you to the 3 members, Mr. Dilip Kapur, founder of Hidesign, Shalinee Gurtu representing Ravissant, and Mr. Samrath Bedi representing Forest Essentials. Very briefly, they'll give you a little story from vision to execution, and perhaps, if it's not too confidential, the road ahead for your brands. Over to you. You want your presentation?
Yeah, this is very short. Apologies to you. All right, I mean, first of all, the brand, the Indian brand that I've always most admired is right here. And there are, when we go through just a very short 5-minute thing, there are reasons why I believe that is so. Now, how do I move this? Okay, let's go. All right. I think it's, you brought it out, it's about an identity, right? I was invited to speak at the Comité Colbert, which the smartest brands in the world, all the French luxury brands. I gave a beautiful speech. I gave a presentation, shouldn't have done it. At the end of it, they made me feel like a total fool. They said, what the hell are you doing here trying to be like us when there are so many of us around? You know, you're just going to be another Me Too at the bottom of the queue. Tell us what is it that you're going to do that's special about you, that's different, and that's going to have a reason for you to come to us next time. It was a very humbling experience. So it's really about identity. I think talking about an Indian brand is about identity. What is it that makes us different? What is it that will give us a reason to exist? That's a very existential question to me. And when I talk about Hidesign, some of the issues may be similar to most of us. I think they are somewhat similar. Some of them, they may not be in common. First thing, I'm fed up of hearing Indian brands saying they're from Paris or Milan or New York or London or wherever the hell they're from. Well, we're from a really tiny little place called Pondicherry. And it's really, are you been there? Yes. All right, okay, maybe that's all right. Okay, I call it Little Utopia, whatever. And really, where you come from creates your identity. It affects who you are, what you are. I can't be a Parisian, even though Louis Vuitton asked me to make an office there. I'd never be a Parisian because I'm from Pondicherry. Now, what does that mean? I'll quickly tell you 3 things that it has meant for me coming from Pondicherry. Maybe they're common. I see certain similarities between us. One is being natural, ecological, and sustainable comes very naturally to us Indians. We love natural. Having just come back from China 3 days ago, the 2 Asian giants, one of the biggest differences, we do love nature. And I think it's something that Indians, we can bring out. The second thing is we have a love for human hands. And I call it human hands of soul. I think we are great in that. We have a great craftsmanship. And I think that's what I love about Oberoi's. I don't love your buildings necessarily, but man, I love you the way you handle us. You really have soul. No other place I go to in the world do I see that. And I think that's something that comes from us being Indians. I think the third is something that's so intrinsic in creating a brand is that you have to be innovative. You know, and that's what I see between here, all three of us sitting, and Oberoi's. We found our own story. We have our own identity. And because we didn't copy. We'd figured that out quite some time ago. If you copy, well, you're not an original brand. As simple as that. That's it.
You can take the Q&A later after the course.
Okay.
Namaste everyone. Thank you, Manoj. So I'm representing Ravissant today. Unfortunately, our founder, Mr. Ravi Chawla, was unable to come, and neither his daughter. So Ravissant was India's first homegrown luxury brand. It was established in 1981 by this very dynamic duo, very enterprising duo of Ravi and Meena Chawla, who were into exports, big time exports, and at one time they were the largest garment exporters in India. So when the export market started getting a little tepid, they decided to move on to luxury fashion. And just a little bit of a trivia, which I kind of found interesting before I joined Ravissant. I was wondering the name Ravissant. So it is a French word which means delightful, ravishing, entrancing. And it's a coincidence that this French adjective contains the first name of our founder, Ravi. So that's a little bit of trivia which I really found interesting. So the Chawla couple had a very clear goal on their various travels to Europe because of their garment trade. They started observing the finish of foreign goods, and they wanted to incorporate that kind of finish but using Indian techniques and fabrics. But they had no clue how to go about it in the practical terms because they were into mass exports and this was going to be a totally niche market. So they employed a complete European team of architects, interior designers, textile designers, choreographers, and models to set up Ravissant. They also invested 2 years in training our local craftsmen, our karigars, to achieve that kind of mindset, for the finishing of the seams, etc., that the new Ravissant label demanded. And the results were spectacular. They were the first ones, I don't know, some of you all may be party to their saris. They were the first ones to introduce all over printed saris, bold prints, brilliant hues, and ready to wear tunic sets with structured bottoms, asymmetric cuts, and paired up with scarves rather than dupattas. It was a total revolution, especially in Delhi and Mumbai, where we had our stores. The minute the merchandise were on the shelves in the stores, it used to sell out in minutes. People used to place their orders weeks in advance. In fact, one of our clients, who's a big businesswoman now, she was very specific. She wanted the Ravissant label on the outside of the garment. Such was the craze. Then simultaneously, we branched out into hand-embroidered soft furnishings like bed covers, cushion covers, table linens, etc. We had a whole lot of hand embroidery people, weavers from Banaras, block printers from Faridabad. And then started the silver story in 1991. And till date, silver is our core business. It's grown exponentially in the past few years, and we are just rising higher and higher. So that's just a brief thing about our business right now. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samrath. I represent Forest Essentials. We have a relatively new story. The brand was actually born in 2001. And as a lot of brands, it was born out of a need, and a need that turned into a passion. And, it was actually founded by my mother, Meera Kulkarni, who actually at that time was dabbling in beauty, a housewife, no business experience, and found this need to go and look at beauty products to understand why. India, given its legacy, its tradition, recipes which are actually present in all your homes over the years, to understanding why we didn't have a representation of these beauty products in a more prestige, in a more luxury environment, whether it was in terms of packaging, whether it was in terms of formulations. It was always something mass or always something imported. So it started from there, and I think as the discovery went on and the journey started, it became from a need to, like I said, a passion, and then finally an obsession. It was something that was done with no business planning, goes against everything that you're taught in schools and an MBA in business. And so when it started, I was actually I was doing banking in New York. I was working with Stan Chart at the World Trade Center, and I decided to come back to India because I had gone to boarding school and then college. And when I came back, I was actually going to go back into banking, but I started helping her with what she was doing. And then finally I spoke with her and then decided to join her. So I joined her in 2002, and we've built the business since then. It's been a very interesting story because I think a lot of it, like I said, was not business planning, but a lot of it was gut instinct, a lot of understanding of what we wanted out of the brand. And this brand has been built on a very strong philosophy. A very strong philosophy which has, we've not actually had to pivot like a lot of brands had to, because we were very clear from the beginning what we wanted to represent. So one was, of course, India. We wanted to make India known. We wanted to bring out the traditions, represent India strongly, not only in India, but also what we thought would be a global brand one day. The second was quality. There was going to be no compromise on quality. No matter what the cost, no matter what selling price we were going to do it at. And I still remember, we were trying to figure out how to actually distribute the product. In FMCG, it's always like, you talked about kiranas, you've talked about, having some department stores, but there was no actual medium for us to actually, to sell this product, because for us, it wasn't just a product, it was a lifestyle. It was everything around the product. So all the intangibles about service, about how we're going to explain it, where we're going to sell it, what the atmosphere is going to be where we sell it. So finally, we got an opportunity in 2004. Someone offered us a store in Khan Market. We said, what a great idea, till we heard the rent. And I think that was more than the turnover of our company. But my mother, being very gung-ho and of course having no experience, said, you know what, let's just take it. So we did. And I remember thinking, given my business background, that, this is going to be ridiculous. It's not going to happen. But it was interesting because, from the first day we started, we hadn't even opened the shutters of the store and people started walking in. And I still remember there was a big topic on pricing. Soaps were either, at that time, and I'm talking 2004, was 10 rupees and 20 rupees and always had a film star on it. And then you had the imports that came in from abroad, which were priced and so on and so forth. And we decided to price our soaps at 100 rupees. And I remember the whole ecosystem around me saying, you're crazy. No one's going to buy a soap for 100. And we said, but listen, we put in all the ingredients, whether it was almond oil, whether it was, sesame, whatever it was, and it was just very expensive ingredients to use. And I remember we started selling from literally day one. It was literally a revolution in my eyes, because I've seen the consumer journey from then till today, and it's been fantastic. We then, of course, decided, that this was the only way we're going to sell the product. It's been a very expensive, very, very difficult situation to build stores in India. Today we have over 170 stores. Now, while it might not seem too large a number in a global context, to build stores across India, as you all know, you guys are in the service industry, you work with large brands, is very difficult. The consumer is so different. We're actually less integrated than Europe is presently, because it's just, everything is so different from not only state to state, but city to city. So it's been a learning experience in terms of what we've gone through. And I think, seeing the consumer journey from where it was always about looking at the packaging, looking at, what the smell, today, to where a consumer knows every single thing about an ingredient, knows everything about, they're actually coming to question you. They're not coming to ask. They're coming to test your knowledge within the stores. And that's something that we've learned. And as I've always told my staff, I said, never sell the product. Explain it well enough and someone will buy it. So we've gone through this entire evolution, but coming back to my philosophy, both in terms of what I talked to you about, whether it was in terms of quality, today, I think from what we're seeing and what is now in fashion, or what seems to be the trend, was something that always existed with us. One thing my mother was very clear was on women empowerment. So when we set up our first, workshop, I don't even call it a factory, our workshop, we set it up high up in the Himalayas, in the middle of nowhere. There were no roads, there was no electricity, but she was very clear that she wanted to empower women in a community where there was no other alternative to other than keeping the homes. And it took us a long journey. It took us many months to convince even the men of the area, the panchayats, everybody who was involved in the system. And then we finally started work with women there. It was amazing because they, as a workforce, whether you talk about loyalty, whether you talk about the ethics, you talk about the hard work, it's fantastic. Today, almost 46% of my company are women. I have a women boss, so it's very interesting. It's not just about from a worker level, but from a management position, and we're seeing all of these changes take place. Sustainability, which I know is an extremely big topic with all of you, is something that we built into the brand from the very beginning. Sustainability is not just about getting rid of plastic. It's an entire cycle. It's a lifestyle. So whether you talk about manufacturing, whether you talk about your logistics, whether you talk about your end product, what you do with everything at the end, it's all a cycle. So nothing is 100% sustainable, but what you do is you try and cut it down and use it as much as possible. So that again is something that we'll talk about more further in the chat. Thank you.
I'll just take a few questions and answers. You first. Sorry. Yeah. It's okay now. Okay, thanks. There's a bit of exotic in Hidesign, which is based out of Auroville, right? Not Pondicherry.
I live.
Okay, fine. Tell me, it's India has many diverse cultures, so there are many opportunities for brands to bring different facets of India abroad. The fact that Auroville is a deeply spiritual place, does it resonate in the messaging of your brand somehow, directly or indirectly?
I think two things. One is design, and the second is.
I think we'll have to.
We're doing something wrong here?
Yeah.
Just tap on the mic.
Yeah.
Any better?
Yeah, just let me hold it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. I think two things always: design and the values that a brand expresses always come from the culture where you come from.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't, then you're a liar.
Okay.
So I think, of course, growing up in an ashram and then growing up in Auroville has very strongly influenced certain things. Even simple things like every notebook I had in the ashram had these things in French. There's a great beauty in simplicity.
Okay.
So that's something never goes out of your brain. So yeah, I think it affects us a lot. I still work in Auroville also, so it's not.
Sure.
So I think those values matter a lot to us.
Right. Second question, if I may. Leather and Hidesign are pretty closely related.
Mm-hmm.
Has that ever in international markets caused problems with animal rights activists?
Well, you read, you know that PETA is against, well, they're more against the way animals are treated in India than about the actual leather part of it. They're against fur. For us, it's always been the most sustainable things because we are a byproduct of the meat industry.
Okay.
So you're using a waste product and creating it. The second thing that one of the core values from right from the beginning for us was that our tanning was a vegetable tanning.
Okay.
Where, by the way, India was considered for hundreds of years the greatest,
Vegetable tan.
the best vegetable tanner in the world.
Yeah.
So we have followed that process. There are other things. I think sustainability is something that somebody mentioned that it goes into everything. Our factory is more than 100% solar. We don't use plastic.
Right.
So it affects in every way. We're building a forest. It affects you in every way, actually.
Okay, thanks. Shalinee, with you. So just as Hidesign is very closely associated with leather, Ravissant, as you mentioned, I didn't know about the fashion fabrics,
In
garments.
fact, Ravissant started, the main business was fashion. And then right now, like I said, our main business is silver.
Yeah.
And it's silver on another level actually. One can't even imagine the type of pieces that are done. You know, it's extraordinary. In fact, when it started in 1991, I wasn't there at that time, but when I see the pieces now, I said, man, these pieces were created in 1991. Who would have ever thought of this kind of design? And the main thing was selling by piece, not by weight. In India, we're used to buying metal by weight. Even today, we have clients coming. And kitna vajan? You said it's not vajan. It's by piece because it's, the conceptualization and the labor that goes into this product. We've just moved out of that typical functionality ke ye value ke hisab se, weight ke hisab se. Because each of our pieces are pieces of art. You can't just put a tag on the value of it. So it's...
Can I, since I work very closely with the product designers, design brings another question. Which aspect of design does your brand tilt towards, form or function?
It's form, I would say. Form. Most definitely, you'll find
Good
the
question you're asking.
I would say more towards form, but we do have functionality as well.
For example?
Like form, I would say even if you take a jug, you may not be able to use that jug as a jug. It's a fabulous piece to keep maybe even on your mantelpiece. In fact, when I visited one of my clients' places in the farms, she had kept our tea set on the sideboard just as a piece of art. She said, Shalinee, I don't use it, but it's so beautiful. And functionality, of course, we do sell a lot of, dinner sets, thalis, dishes, like everybody for their daughters wearing the trousseau silver has to be from Ravissant.
Okay. Second question, if I may. I think we talked about art denox.
Correct.
Yeah, so we do this very often for, clients whose brands are ingredients in other people's brands.
Okay.
It's like MDH Masale, for instance.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, with Jindal Steel, for instance, is the company behind Art Denox?
Jindal Steel,
Jindal Steel, the family, right?
It is.
So, do you see, therefore, their manifestation of steel, stainless steel, and of course the art that flourishes from that, as, if not competition, at least some way of positioning yourself differently?
No. I think Ravissant is right there. It's got a niche place of its own. And also, like somebody else was asking me the other day, like, what do you think of, there are so many brands which have mushroomed, as a competition. But, we make our products with such complexity and there's so much of art, it's very difficult for anybody else to replicate.
Okay. Thanks.
The bell.
Slightly touchy question. The word Oberoi can be nothing but Indian.
Correct.
And Punjabi. That's another,
from
Pondicherry to the north, that's another culture. Have you ever needed to, like Peugeot, help people pronounce the word Ravissant?
Oh, yes. Definitely. In fact, they think it's Ravissant's, like Ravi Chawla, so Ravissant's. So it is difficult, but now it's been like over 30 years. So people know the brand. It is a French brand, Ravissant.
Okay. Thanks. Samrath, I talked about FMCG, where a lot of us who were in advertising cut their teeth. Now, unlike these two brands where touch and feel at the retail point is a major trigger for purchase, your brand's message is essentially in a bottle, right?
Well, I think in terms of messaging, I think what we do is we also are very clear that it's not just a product in a bottle. I had mentioned this earlier. It's about the experience. It's a lifestyle, right? So if you actually walk into a store, it's not about just handing you the product. My beauty attendants, my Ayurvedic doctors, we can talk to you about anything to do with Ayurveda. So it could be stress, it could be sleep. The idea is to build that entire ecosystem. Beauty is just one aspect of it, and that's what we're actually selling.
Well, this is open to all of you. One thing we've noticed is whenever brands start ascending the price scale and approach semi-luxury or premium levels, imitation becomes the sincerest form of flattery. Do you face piracy, imitation in your markets?
There's a Hidesign China. I had to buy it back. My rights for cost me $88,000. They have catalogs. There is, of course, we've had to go to court several times.
Okay.
So I imagine something similar happens.
Big time.
I see.
It is like big time. They copy the name Ravissant. They copy the card. It's down to the T.
Oh, it's not, okay. Sorry.
It's like, and that as well as the product.
This happens abroad as well?
Abroad, I wouldn't know, but here.
What about you, Jay?
I've seen sellers on China, so
Oh.
on Alibaba, on various things. But this is something that you can't really deeply and strongly fight, because you fight one, then another
Correct.
100 pop up. So the idea is to actually just continue to build your brand, to keep as unique as possible a product, and then you work with this. I mean, this is something that we've registered ourselves now in about 98 countries. So we've done the trademark protections, we've done everything. But after a certain point, it's better to, fight it to a certain extent.
Thank you. I think we'll take note of that. Well, thanks a lot for this brief.
Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Is there a
Or
queue?
something?
Sorry, would they be? Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So you still have 10 minutes.
Is there any questions we could ask? You have the But I have a question.
I have a question to you for Ravissant. The silver that you mentioned is truly outstanding.
Yes,
Absolutely
because
different
we've been-
level.
yeah.
And yes, and I'm sure you're a big fan club in the room. But was this by strategy or just by accident?
Actually, the whole silver started by accident. Mr. Chawla came into contact with one of the Swiss bankers, Dr. Peter Hugler, who got in a Russian-made silver box, and he asked if this could be replicated. And Ravi Chawla took it up as a challenge, and he made 20 pieces, and he got into the groove, and the journey started, and it's on and on. And he really worked towards it, getting European, German silversmiths to do the collection every year, putting your heart and soul in it. Mind-blowing. You got to be there to see him work.
If I can ask one more question, I just like for each one of you, if you could just share with us something which you feel really worked for your brand.
Something that really works.
Really worked,
Turning point.
which which gave you more than incremental spurt. Not necessarily in revenue alone, it could be in branding, whatever, but something which
I
worked,
think,
and to make it more interesting, it worked, and it surprised you that it worked.
I think
Because I think the learnings, the accidental learnings are so priceless.
well, I don't know, everything is an accident in business, but I would say that for the longest time, we were only abroad. When we first decided to start in India, we decided to make a store. Until then, we were working through distributors. The direct contact with the consumer changed totally the way we looked at the business. More than that, it just was very educational. Suddenly, and then secondly, I think I started enjoying my business. I was ready to give up. I was ready to just go back to Oroville and do whatever I wanted. But it changed the way I looked at having a direct contact with the consumer. I think is incredible.
Yeah, I would agree with that, having a direct contact with the consumer. And also, I feel as far as Ravissant is concerned, we changed the mindset of the general clientele to buying plain silver. People were used to the old silver, with all engraved stuff. But we shifted the mindset that silver can be beautiful even without any kind of work in it. So that it took a long time to work on the client's psyche, but I think they came back and back due to this factor.
Mr. Kaul, I am giving answer on behalf of Hidesign because I am his consumer for long back. When you started, I started buying your product. And for me, the value in Hidesign was the quality assurance as well as you gave lifetime warranty. And I remember I used to have an office bag and it needed polish and it was given to your store. It took a week because it went to Pondicherry and then came back to Delhi. But it came back properly with buckles changed, polished and all that. It was almost like new. So the servicing to client, I feel that was the most important aspect. I hope that you are still continuing that, which is not. Actually, it was at that time.
So Anil, I have one question for you.
Yes.
How many bags do you have?
I have 3.
Okay, because one of the
Will you give me
downside of
the
that
photo?
is that you don't buy a second bag.
Yes.
Correct.
How does that help the brand?
No, that is also true. You
I
don't
mean,
buy.
any bag over 30 years for Hidesign, we take it back and give them a free bag in exchange. We're collecting.
Rajiv, thank you. Now I can return those and get new. One comes to you. Thank you, sir. I will do that.
Terrific.
Can I ask you one question? Shopping bags have been,
I wish we could, but unfortunately we can't.
I promise to stay out of politics, but leather bags had been making quite a wave in Parliament, right?
You mean in terms of carrying the financial? Well, Nirmala she's actually a great admirer of Hidesign, so that helps. But she refuses to carry a Hidesign bag into Parliament. Well, I don't know what that answers you.
Dilip,
Mr. Bakaya would
I'll
like
answer.
to ask something.
Dilip, in your journey over a few decades, from a young kid to a hippie to the utopia of Pondicherry, to the evolution of India, what's been your one biggest challenge in your work?
I think it would be different for different people, right? I think for me, it's always been staying motivated. I'm always thinking of just jumping off and and quitting. I'm always thinking of quitting. But I'm sure it's different for most people. I have no business background, was never really that interested.
Okay, so for us, I think the turning point was we've been a brand that's always been built on word of mouth, on experience, on the stores. And I remember that as we started going pan-India and opening, stores in various cities, the idea was how to actually introduce a new consumer to the brand. And I was approached by Star TV back in the day, and they said, you know what, why don't you make national advertisement? I said, we don't have the kind of money to do that. And that's the time that, HD started coming into play. So they said, you know what, we can actually just focus on your audience. So, which I thought was a wonderful idea. And the second thing was to understand how to make the advert. And so I did the most logical thing that my brain could think of. And I went back to my team and I said, what are the 3 best ads you've seen in the last 6 months? So at that time, I think there was a Pepsodent ad and there was some 2-3 ads which really caught our eye. And then I worked my way through, I found a company called Wyden and Kennedy, which used to be the company that actually made Nike. They worked with Phil Knight all the way through. And I went and we did 2 fabulous advertisements with them. And I think that was our turning point to start understanding a brand that's now got credibility that could advertise on television and was becoming a national brand.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for being a good audience.